I used to trust him with all my heart. I used to think that if there was anyone who would never hurt me, it would be my husband. But then I found out I didn't really know the man I had been sleeping next to for the past 8 years at all. He didn't just betray my love. He planned to take away the most important thing in my life, my daughter. He hired a lawyer, played the victim, painted me as an unstable, unfit mother. And I lost everything, all in the span of one summer. My name is Amanda Blake. I'm 35 years old, born and raised in the suburbs of Fort Collins, Colorado. Before everything fell apart, I was a middle school literature teacher. I loved my job, loved the quiet life with my husband and our little girl, Sophie, a bright 6-year-old who carried a fairy tale book with her everywhere. To me, family was everything. My husband Mark was a software engineer for a major tech company in Denver. He was smart, reserved, and had a way of making people trust him. I met him when I was 25 at an educational technology seminar at a university. Love came fast, like a spring breeze, and just 9 months later we got married. The first few years were genuinely happy. We bought a small house with a white picket fence, got a golden retriever named Max, and every summer we took Sophie camping. In the Rocky Mountains, people would look at our family and say, "You two are perfect." And I believed that too. Until one April afternoon last year, came home earlier than usual because I had a headache during class. When I opened the front door, I saw Mark and Rachel, my best friend, in the living room, hugging and laughing, with 2 glasses of wine and a jazz record playing, the kind I hated most. They looked at me like I was the one intruding. Rachel didn't even look guilty. She just stood up, straightened her shirt, and said, "I thought you were still at school." I didn't say a word. I just looked at them, then turned around and walked out of the house. My heart felt like it was being crushed. From that moment on, everything started to fall apart. Mark never apologized. Instead, he became cold and distant. And just a week later, he filed for divorce, citing that he couldn't live with an unstable, controlling wife. He hired a top lawyer in Denver and sent me a warning letter not to negatively influence our daughter. I had never done anything wrong to my child. I loved her more than life itself. But Mark knew that my greatest weakness was Sophie, and he aimed straight for it. In just 3 weeks, I lost my husband, my best friend, and my job, as the mental strain forced me to take an extended leave. My savings dried up due to legal fees. I had once been a stable, educated woman who loved life. Now I was lost, drifting, afraid of losing custody of my daughter. I started driving my old SUV around the country, not to run away, but to find myself again. Sometimes I stopped in small towns, picked up odd jobs like kitchen help, waitressing, or tutoring kids online. Sophie was always with me, and she never once asked why we didn't have a home. She just needed me to be there. I didn't think I would survive that heartbreak. But then, at a small gas station in New Mexico, I met a woman named Claire, and she changed my life forever. I met Claire at a roadside gas station in a small town called Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, a name that felt ripped straight from my own life story. I was struggling to figure out directions while Sophie dozed off in the backseat. The blazing sun was beating through the windshield, making my head throb. As I tried to swipe my card to pay for gas, only to have it declined because my account was nearly empty. A calm woman's voice spoke behind me. "Need some help? I can cover your gas." I turned around, a bit wary, but the woman's eyes, Claire's eyes, didn't hold a trace of pity. Just the steady calm of someone who had seen a lot in her lifetime. I declined, but Claire didn't leave. She just stood there quietly. She wore a light blue linen shirt, her graying hair pulled back neatly, her face lined but strong. After a few seconds of silence, I don't know why, that I burst into tears. Right there, at a gas station, in the heat of summer, in a town I'd never even heard of. Claire didn't ask anything. She just handed me a tissue and invited me to get coffee at the small cafe across the road. Within an hour, I had told her everything. The failed marriage, the betrayal, the upcoming custody battle, the night sleeping in a car, and the fear of losing my daughter. Claire listened intently, and then she said, "You know, I used to be a family lawyer who specialized in custody cases. I'm retired now, but I've never forgotten what it feels like to stand in court when a mother's child is about to be taken away. Even though she's the one who truly loves that child, I could barely believe what I was hearing. It felt like the universe had tossed me a lifeline just when I was about to drown. Claire didn't make any promises, but she offered to help me sort through my paperwork. She told me to come to Santa Fe, where she lived with her older sister, and stay for a while, so I could give Sophie some stability before the trial. My time in Santa Fe brought a rare sense of peace. Claire's home was a cozy wooden house, with a lavender garden in the back and a study full of old law books. In the mornings, I took Sophie to a local school. In the afternoons, I worked part-time at a bakery. In the evenings, Claire and I combed through every document, every file. She taught me how to write a statement, how to tell my story in court with strength, but without bitterness. You can't let your emotions run your words, but you also can't let their lawyer manipulate you into looking crazy, she said. I learned how to stand tall again. Mark, meanwhile, hired a well-known law firm in Denver to file an emergency motion requesting full termination of my custody rights, claiming that I had run away with the child, was living an unstable nomadic life, and incapable of ensuring the child's safety. Those words felt like knives piercing my heart. He, the one who cheated, who betrayed me, was now playing the role of a devoted father concerned for his daughter's future. And I, the mother who held her child every night in a car, who went hungry to save milk for her daughter, was being treated like a threat. Claire prepared everything for me thoroughly. The court date was set in Austin, Texas, where Mark had officially registered his residence. I drove my old SUV there, filled with anxiety, but no longer afraid. Hearing began at 9 a.m. I wore the dress Claire had lent me, a muted blue-grey, simple and modest. Sophie was taken to the court's childcare room. I remember how tightly she held my hand before going in, her big round eyes looking up at me. "You'll be okay, right, Mommy?" I kissed her forehead. "I'll protect you, no matter what." Standing before the court, I told my story. No tears, no accusations, just the truth. I presented evidence of Mark's affair, text messages between him and Rachel, detailed records of our cross-state travels with safe lodging, and Sophie's temporary enrollment certificate from New Mexico. I even brought one of her drawings. I love Mommy the most in the world. Mark's attorney, on the other hand, repeatedly tried to make me lose my composure. They called me unstable, homeless, and unemployed. But this time, I didn't break. Claire sat silently behind me, nodding each time I looked her way. I didn't know what would happen. The court didn't issue a ruling that day. But I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the woman crushed by betrayal. I had fought, and this time I didn't fight alone. 3 weeks after the hearing, I received a letter from the office of the Travis County judge. I stood in Claire's kitchen, hands trembling as I opened the envelope. My heart pounded like a drum. Claire sat beside me, gently placing her hand on my shoulder, saying nothing. Inside was the official court ruling. Based on the evidence submitted, courtroom testimony, the child's living conditions, and the Emotional stability of the mother. The court hereby rules. Amanda Blake shall retain full legal and physical custody of Sophie Dawson. Mr. Mark Dawson shall be granted supervised visitation twice a month in a neutral environment, under third-party supervision. I had to read it 3 times before I could believe it. I had 1 dot not because I had more money or better connections, but because I didn't give up. I stood up, I faced it, and I didn't let anyone else define who I was. I burst into tears. Claire hugged me tightly and whispered, "You did it. Not for revenge, but for her. Because you are a real mother." As for Mark, he didn't show up to a single visitation in the 3 months that followed. Rachel had left him just a week after the trial. Claire told me, those who come from betrayal often leave the same way. I never heard from either of them again. And I didn't need to. I spent that summer with Sophie traveling through Utah, Wyoming, and Montana. We camped in national parks, stargazed at night, learned to pitch tents, cook outdoors, write journals, and read together every evening. I turned my story into a blog called Miles with Mom, where I shared our life on the road after divorce, how to heal from heartbreak, and most importantly, how not to lose yourself even when the world turns its back on you at first. There were only a few dozen readers, but over time, thousands of single moms found their way to the blog, sending emails and leaving comments like, "Your story was exactly what I needed during my weakest moment. I thought I was the only one who'd had my child taken from me like that." A small publishing house in Oregon reached out, asking to turn the blog into a book. I agreed, not for the money, but because I wanted my story to mean something for those who felt like they had no voice. A year after the court ruling, Sophie and I stood on the beach in California. She ran barefoot across the sand, her hair flying in the wind, laughing like she'd never known what loss meant. I sat in a folding chair, coffee in hand, gazing out at the horizon. I was no longer the woman in that old SUV, panicked, lost, and afraid. I was Amanda Blake, a mother, a survivor, and someone who had redefined the meaning of family with her own hands. Sometimes, revenge doesn't come from hurting those who hurt you. It comes from the fact that you lived, stood tall, and found happiness more than ever before. I didn't just keep my daughter. I kept myself. Stories like Amanda Blake's don't just move us to tears. They inspire us deeply. It's not only a journey through betrayal and loss, but also one of rediscovering oneself, rebuilding trust, and honoring the sacred bond between a mother and her child. The way Amanda stood back up after such deep wounds, bravely fought for custody, and turned pain into power commands admiration. This story reminds us that a mother's resilience is sometimes the most powerful weapon in the world. If you've ever been through something similar, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel, so you won't miss more heartfelt stories and meaningful lessons about family, love, and strength after heartbreak.